of our theology and our practice.
Yes, I'm religious, but no, I'm not a freak.
People tend to become atheists not because of their philosophical beliefs, but because of their personal conviction of sin.
If you have any questions, as usual, please email us sg101@cycnow.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
The things of Christianity are very important. The relics of the saints. Why do we have relics of saints? Why the bones of the saints are important? Holiness is a power which can enter into material objects. Monks show a holy relation to nature. St. Anthony himself said, when he was asked, "Father, why you have no book? How do you learn? How do you study? How do you read?" This is my book. This plays to show me that the spirit is like an eagle.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Q&A on CYC. Tonight we will be discussing unhealthy self-esteem and how it can lead to feelings of worthlessness for oneself and one situation. Tonight we are very blessed to be joined by our beloved Abuna Shenouti Gobran, who's the parish priest of St. Mary and St. Mina's Coptic Orthodox Church in Bexley. Welcome, Abuna.
Welcome, Tess.
And also psychologist Ramsey Andrews. Welcome, Ramsey. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we start our conversation, we're going to go to a very quick video, so please join in and we'll be back in a moment.
This woman, she is convinced that what she needs in order to fix her thirst problem is more jars. And we do the same thing, don't we? We think that in order to change the way we see ourselves or fix our self-esteem problem, we need more jars. Some of y'all, you have had low self-esteem and a low self-image for years, and you're just throwing jars at the problem. More workouts, more makeup, a better body, more boyfriends, more hookups, more girlfriends, another jar, Maybe this will change things. Maybe this will make me not hate myself. Maybe this text, or maybe drinking this, or maybe trying this. Another jar. Does this make it better? Does this make it better? But I came here to tell you tonight that your problem is not the jar, people. Your problem is that you're drawing from the wrong well.
Welcome back, viewers. Just a reminder, this is a live show, so please do send your questions. You can call if you're brave enough, or you can send them on an SMS to phone number 0410 950 949, and I'm waiting here to ask your question. So the first question for the evening, Ramsey, could you please explain what is self-esteem before we get into the unhealthy aspect of self-esteem?
So there are many different types of schools of thought actually, but generally speaking, you've got two elements of self-esteem. The first one, which is probably the more common one, is how I feel about myself as a person, my sense of self-worth. Okay, or as some people would say, my sense of self-respect, how much I actually respect myself, how much I think I'm worthy of having what I have, and that goes for anything in life. And then we have the other element, which is how I perceive my own skills and abilities. So not my actual skills and abilities, that's one thing, but then I've got my own perception of my skills and abilities. So in other words, if I feel like I can't really do much, but I'm capable of doing a lot, then I have low self-efficacy. Whereas if I feel that I can do a lot more than what I can actually do, then we would say it's a little bit too high. So we've got those two components basically: how I feel about myself as a person, how worthy I feel, and how much I feel that I can take on life's challenges, and do I have the skills and abilities to do that.
Excellent. So Ramsey, how do you see this playing out in today's society in terms of unhealthy self-esteem?
So when you've got unhealthy self-esteem, that can manifest itself in different ways. So first of all, you've got internal manifestations and you've got external manifestations. So in terms of how it internally plays out, I'm going to mention three things.
Okay.
So first of all, you've got your sense of belongingness, because we all belong to groups, such as, your work, the work setting, church, family. And if you have an unhealthy self-esteem, one that's a little bit too low, then you're not going to feel like you belong. There's this sense of, I don't deserve to be around my family, for instance, or I don't deserve to have the job that I've got. And so that comes down to, I'm guessing we're probably going to talk about causes of self-esteem later on.
Yes.
So I don't want to get too much into the causes, but there are cognitions or thoughts behind why I feel that way.
Yeah.
So that's that sense of belongingness. Next we have sense of worthiness, which is kind of similar. There is a crossover there, but my sense of worthiness is, do I feel that I'm worthy to even just be alive? Sometimes people as Christians don't feel that they're worthy to be in church or to receive gifts or to receive attention from people. So there's that lack of sense of worthiness, and then there's the sense of competence, like I said, which is very related to self-efficacy. So all of these things are internal. So if my sense of competence is quite low, it means that I don't think that I actually have skills and abilities to be able to manage everyday challenges in life. Whereas in actual fact, if I do feel relaxed, if I'm momentarily going through, maybe if I'm having a good day, I can actually do those things and I can manage challenges because I do actually have the skills.
Yeah.
So that's internal. So people can't see those three elements that I've just mentioned. But then externally, it manifests itself when you see people, especially if you know somebody really well and they're doing things such as taking care of their appearance quite a lot, for instance. So again, I'm going to mention three areas, and appearance is one of them. If people are trying to really go overboard in terms of looking good or going to the gym, having a good body, all of these things that especially young people try to do. A lot of people do those sorts of things for the wrong reasons, because they're trying to make up for something that they don't feel, okay? So they don't feel that sense of worthiness, so they go to external things. And they're moving away from their values, what they really value. They're more emotionally driven. It's what they desire, and it's kind of, like I said, it's used to make up for something that isn't there. Then we have performance. So people try to, they feel I'm only going to be worthwhile if I have a good job, if I have a good status in society, and that sort of thing. So again, they really try hard to get these sorts of outcomes, and they miss the whole purpose of life. The whole point of life is not about outcomes. It's actually about being a good person. So whoever I think I should be, if I'm not making the effort to do that and trying to please other people, trying to fit this sense of this is who I should be to be accepted by other people, that's what it means to have an unhealthy self-esteem. So I've mentioned those three areas: appearance, performance, and status. So they're the external factors, and then you have the internal factors, like I mentioned: belongingness, worthiness, and competence.
So, and then I imagine we're talking about a person valuing themselves, and we're talking about appearance and jobs, and as the little video said at the front, we just keep adding and doing more things and trying to do more things to make us feel that we're going to be more worthy, when then probably, well, more than likely we are worthy. We can do a job. If we're a qualified accountant, we can do it, but we may be afraid to go out and maybe give a presentation on some facts and figures, for instance. So, Borna, how do you see that playing out in your role as a priest?
In terms of especially the issue of worthiness, being worthy, I come across many cases where people actually don't feel as Ramsey said, they don't feel worthy to be at church. You know, he tried to say the church is for the saints. I'm not worthy to be part of the church because I'm a sinner, for example. Or they think because of their low self-esteem, they look down on themselves and they think they don't even be worthy to be part of the people that come to church. So obviously after what Ramsey's saying, it makes sense now that there's an underlying issue of low self-esteem. And that's reflecting in the spiritual life. And for them even to approach any holy place, I think they're even worthy to enter that.
Yes. And what about maybe within a family setting, I guess? Could that cause issues in a family setting if they think they're less than any of the other people in the family? And what, could that cause them to withdraw? Because you would think, and we'll get into a bit later, I guess, the causes and, as you said, how this comes. So, it's lovely to know about the church setting, but in terms of other settings, or like your friends, and these days we have a lot of postings on all sorts of media. So, how can that play out, and how can that become dangerous or unhealthy for us if we're concentrating on that all the time?
Of course, because you're always comparing yourself with others. And now with the widespread of social media, everyone is comparing. There's different standards now. People have a lot of standards to compare themselves with. And they think they're not good enough because someone else is doing something better. Someone has a better image. Someone has a better status. Someone has, more financially well off. So there's always that comparison based on the images they see, which is most of the time is not actually true, because we don't know what happens behind the scenes. So people always get the sense of self-worth compared to others by measuring themselves with others, which is completely a flawed thinking. It's the wrong way to think like that, because everyone is unique in their own way.
Yes, and loved by a lot.
So comparison is a huge problem that will contribute to low self-esteem.
Yeah. So when we talk about people in the Bible, and we talk about even Christ's disciples, can you think of a great example where we can display self-esteem going both ways?
Of course, yeah. The very clear example of that is the difference between St. Peter and Judas. Both of them had different levels of self-esteem. Both of them denied Christ in different ways. Both of them committed a very bad sin. But the way they dealt with it was actually different. We see St. Peter, for example, had very high self-esteem for himself. He used to always, very outspoken and always say, I'm prepared to go with you wherever you go. I'm prepared to die with you. And he was always, taking the initiative and sort of showing himself to be not scared. We find him denying Christ 3 times before a servant. So obviously he had a false perception, or a false sort of measuring what his self-esteem is like, and he went sort of to the higher level, and then he fell. And we see the other side compared to that, the opposite side of Judas. Judas as well denied Christ, he surrendered him, but at the same time he fell into despair. So he did not have hope in God forgiving him. So because of his low self-esteem, he actually fell into despair and went to commit suicide. So we can see the 2 extremes of self-esteem in that case.
So one feeling they're still worthy of the love of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the other one totally losing hope, which is why he took his life.
Because St. Peter believed that God loves him, believed in his worth through Christ.
Yeah.
But Judas looked at himself only. He did not look at himself through the lens of Christ.
Yes.
But St. Peter did. St. Peter, after he did the sin, he actually knew deep inside him that he is of some value or some worth in Christ's eyes. And he held on that, and that helped him to repent and be reinstated back. So that's very
good,
important.
Buna. And Ramsey, is there such a thing as having too high self-esteem? We were talking about low self-esteem, but what about too high self-esteem? And maybe, one of the examples that Buna just mentioned as well might be typical of that.
Yes, absolutely. I think this movement, even in the even amongst psychology professionals and in the world of psychology, there's a movement called positive psychology that talks about the importance of having high self-esteem. But then more recently, there's been another movement that says, hang on a minute, that can also be a problem. So having too high self-esteem and having this push, and parents and teachers at school having, pushing for high self-esteem can also be problematic, and we've got to keep things balanced. I've actually got a case example of a guy that I was working with a few years back, and he, at the point that I had seen him, he actually had very low self-esteem. So his self-esteem came plummeting down, and that was the first time in his life that he'd actually felt that way. He'd fallen into depression. And the reason for that is because he had a whole series of, over a few years, he had a whole series of jobs that he wouldn't last in a job for more than 6 months. So every time he'd go to a job, and this was straight after finishing his HSC, because he hadn't really kind of experienced the outside world, and his whole life his parents had been telling him that he was right. Whatever he did was right. So even when he was wrong, he was right. Okay. So he developed this unrealistic kind of view of himself. It must have felt very good, but then when you go into the outside world, that's when you start to experience problems. And so after school, first experience that he had with an employer, obviously the employer is not going to treat him, the same way that his parents treated him. If he does something wrong, he's going to get pulled up for it. But because he wasn't used to that, his reaction was the same way that any of us would react if we're used to a particular routine or a particular way of being treated, and then all of a sudden, he's being put down, which happens all the time in the workplace, and obviously he's got this high sense of self-esteem, that says there is no way that anybody should treat me that way, as opposed to, look, I can be treated that way, and that's okay, because I'm not the only person, and so. As you can imagine, he had several job failures and terminations, and then his sense of not only his sense of self-respect, but his sense of self-efficacy also declined because he thought he wasn't capable of keeping a job. So that's probably a good example of how your self-esteem can be too high and detrimental.
So even being too high, the net result is still low self-esteem at the end of the day. So that's always where it gets to.
Which is quite ironic, isn't it?
Unhealthy.
I think it's readjusted to reality.
Yes.
Because the proper balance is to be realistic, to have a realistic view of who you are and the expectations of people from you and your self-worth. So if it goes too low, too high, in that case was readjusted back. Once he started dealing with people, they just readjusted back to where it should be.
But I guess he had to go through it the hard way,
Yes.
And that could have been avoided. But
yes.
But it's funny that we have the example, because usually the most cases that I personally see is the opposite. Actually, the parents going the opposite, telling the children, they're not good enough, basically. So
that's right. Yeah.
So that's probably an odd case. So it's very unique.
So what we might do now is just touch on the causes of unhealthy self-esteem. So maybe, Ramsey, if you can just lead us off into that area, please, that would be wonderful.
When we talk about the causes of unhealthy self-esteem, I sort of spoke a little bit about it when I mentioned the case with the high self-esteem. But generally, I guess low self-esteem is probably more common than the high self-esteem issue. When we talk about causes, we've got to go right back to upbringing. So how was I raised? How were my parents at home? How did they treat me? Was I raised in a punitive environment, where I was heavily disciplined? Even if I don't remember, because a lot of people that have gone through traumatic experiences early on in their life, in childhood, for instance, tend to block out those experiences and won't remember anything before the age of 10 or sometimes even 15.
Wow.
So but it still has an impact on you whether you remember it or not. And so if you've been raised in an environment where there was a lot of physical punishment, where there was, you wouldn't be rewarded for positive behaviours, and everything was, you're put down quite a lot. Obviously, you're going to develop a very low sense of self-worth. So I think upbringing is really important, and it's really important to be balanced. So the messages that we should be sending to parents is to, give your child a realistic idea of who they are and their sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
I think the problem with that becomes because of the parents' background as well. So the parents are raised by their parents in this way, so they think this is the right way of raising their children. So they think, for example, by being critical of their action, they're actually trying to improve them. So, for example, I had a case where the parent keeps telling his child he doesn't want to go to school, he's lazy in studying. The parent used to keep telling his son, "You're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure." Until he himself believed, he said, "I'm a failure." Okay? And he can't do anything, he stopped doing anything because he now deeply inside feels he's a failure. He's hopeless. Because he keeps hearing that. But the parent on the other side doesn't know that. They think by doing this, it's an encouragement. Okay, that they think the child will say, "Okay, I'm going to prove my parents wrong. I'm going to go out there and prove them wrong and be successful." It doesn't work like that.
And the issue is that when I'm raised in such a way and I'm only good enough to my parents, or it's not really, like, I know that, as you said, Abuna, the parents mean well, and their children are always going to be of utmost importance to them. But I think at the same time, unhealthy self-esteem doesn't develop based on the parents' intentions. It develops because of the person's perception of their parents' intentions. So if the parent intends well, but the child's only being rewarded, or the teenager's only being rewarded because of, whenever they get good grades, for instance, their understanding of who they are is going to be, I'm only good enough if I get good grades. And if they're not intelligent enough, and genetics plays a role, what if they've got an intellectual disability and the parents don't know about it? They might have a mild intellectual disability or something like that. And so their sense of self-worth will be based on, their performance. If their performance isn't great, then it doesn't matter what their parents think of them. It's how they perceive themselves. And so the advice that we would give to parents is reward your children for trying hard, and because that's a value. It's got nothing to do with how well you do at school or what your performance is. It's not an outcome, if you like. Yeah, but we have too many. Yeah, we have too many rewards and too many parents rewarding their children with extravagant gifts, and especially in our community, when they do well in their HSC, when they do well, whatever it is in life. And it's not that the effort isn't rewarded, but it's not rewarded as much.
Yes.
And so it becomes this unspoken thing where that person begins to understand their self-worth based on outcomes, like I was saying before, and they fall into this trap, later on in life, where it's all about outcomes.
And I heard some educators now trying to adopt that. There's a shift in their thinking. Instead of rewarding and giving awards for outcomes based on grades, they actually give to best effort, for trying hard, for doing things, to actually recognise exactly what you're saying, the effort component of it, which is very important.
And even in positive parenting courses now as well, where we're trying to, as you said, encourage the effort, because that is where the value is. We all need to know that we are valued whether we succeed or we fail. And even the word failure, it's a very difficult word, because if you fail at something or you don't quite get there and you learn by it and move on, it's a great thing. I once had a manager who said, if you've made a mistake, that's not a problem. I'll look at that as an investment if you get up and you do something about it and it doesn't happen again. So these things are necessary for life and to develop who we are. But I just thought really fascinating, though, that we have one situation where a parent is being punitive and strict, another one where the parent is gifting, and either way it's causing difficulties, because one is based on outcomes, not the value of who they are and the effort, and the other one is just saying, well, you're never going to get there because everything you're doing is not right. So in terms of other causes, are things like abuse, or how does that play a part in?
Yeah, so definitely abuse is a huge thing, and it's, I would say 9 times out of 10, if a child has been severely abused, they're going to have low self-esteem issues at some point in their life. So I'm talking about physical abuse, mental abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse. So all of these abuses basically get a person to think, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, I'm damaged goods. So they begin to develop this idea of themselves as, I'm not good enough, because I'll compare themselves to other people around them, and I'm damaged goods, so I'm no good. So that's a big one. And then, so that's the kind of, they're the background sort of causes. And then that leads to, as I said, these beliefs or these rules that I have in my mind about myself, about the world, and about other people. So a belief about myself is, for instance, like I said, I'm a failure. Instead of I'm a person who fails at times, I am a failure. As a person, everything I do is a failure. And that's obviously not true, but just because it's not true, it doesn't mean that I don't have it as a belief system.
I understand.
And so these beliefs, what we have to realise is that they operate on a subconscious level. We are definitely not aware of them.
Yeah. Ramsey, can I just stop you there for one moment? Sure. Sorry, we've had a question come in from the audience. Thank you so much for your question. And the question is, how can I tell if a youth has low self-esteem or is just attention seeking? That's a great question. Being a mum, that is a great question. Abuna and Ramsey, would you like to?
You can start.
So sometimes it's a bit hard to tell unless I know the person quite well. When it comes to attention-seeking behaviours, the reason why I seek attention is because I feel that I need to be accepted, by other people. I'm not good enough for myself in my own company. So again, it's likely that that person's going to be thinking outcomes-based. I need to be liked by other people. I need to achieve a situation where I've got lots of friends, for instance. So it definitely is, I think, an indication that there may be low self-esteem happening there. Yeah. And so to answer the question, is it low self-esteem or is it just attention-seeking behaviour, I wouldn't really draw much of a distinction between the two. I would say that they're very interlinked.
Yes.
And maybe the reason why they are acting out is whether it's low self-esteem, but it might be some other emotional issue or psychological issue that they're dealing with, or it may be that they're dealing with some sort of bullying even outside the home environment that we're not even aware of, or some struggles that they have with friendship groups or something, and perhaps could that be the way? And as the viewer is saying, they're acting out. So is it something that, as a parent, I guess we should notice that there should be some sort of alarm bell going off there, and whether it's sort of low self-esteem or something else, we need to investigate that. And perhaps what would you suggest as a quick, maybe question that we could ask the child or the young adult that the parent is dealing with?
Yeah. I agree with Ramsey, what he said. I don't think we should be drawing any distinction between the two. Yeah. So if someone is trying to seek attention, that indicates there's an element of something wrong with the self-esteem there. Yeah. That needs to be addressed or needs to be looked at. So they're interrelated. So otherwise they wouldn't be seeking the attention. They wouldn't be doing this to get something else. Seeking the attention to feel that they're important. So obviously the fact that they don't feel that is because they don't have their self-worth, the proper self-worth. Yeah. They need someone to highlight that for them. And then to your second question is, the causes behind that could be the external factors. What's happening at school, what's happening at work, what's happening with their peers. This is what would need to be investigated. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's something behind that as well. Yeah. This is sort of the symptoms, but what is the underlying cause of that? That's what we need to investigate.
Yes, yep. So Abuna and Ramsey, just going to take just a short interval. We're going to watch a beautiful performance by Nora Banub of a lovely song called Known. And she's performed with Fred Curry in backup acoustic. So please enjoy this song. We'll be back in a moment.
It's been another day when it seems like faith eludes me. Everything's been so confusing. Fear got the best of me. Now I'm lying here worried about tomorrow, 'cause the weight of everything I don't know feels so heavy I can't sleep. But the truth remains the same, even when I don't know what to pray. But what I know is you, my God, are real. never be a day you are just a breath away. And through it all, I've got to hold to what I know. I could throw my fists in the air demanding answers, but in spite of all the questions, I'm still giving you my life. And if it doesn't turn out like I think it should, it doesn't change the fact you're always good. Your ways are higher than mine, and the truth remains the same. Even when I don't know what to pray, then what I know is you, my God, are real. No matter how I feel, you never let me go. And what I know is there will never be a day you are just a breath away. And through it all, I've got to hold to love that's never failing, to hope that keeps on saying, carry on, carry on. But what I know is you, my God, are real. No matter how I feel, you never let me go. And what I know is there will never be a day you are just a breath away. And through it all, I've got to hold to what I know. Gotta hold to what I know. What I know. What I know.
Welcome back, viewers. We're going to go to a very quick commercial break, and as soon as we're finished from that, we're going to be discussing the effects of unhealthy self-esteem. So please don't go away and send those questions in.
I'd like to welcome you to a new series on CYC called Disciples of All Nations. St. Mary is also a beautiful example of a disciple. He became such a holy man. There was nothing said by him in the entire New Testament. Where he truly was an epitome of a disciple to the nations. My name is Father Peter Saad of St. Peter and St. Paul Coptic Orthodox Church in Montreal, and I'd like to welcome you to a new series on CYC called Disciples of All Nations.
Are we at least typical in that multiverse? If there is any answer at all to those questions, they will not find them in the rules of chess. If you think that the universe is the only thing that exists, if you think that natural stuff is the only stuff, there's the stuff that God does and the stuff that science explains. God made the whole thing. And what science is doing is explaining the stuff that God did. Science doesn't explain everything. If you think that the universe is the only thing that exists, if you think that natural stuff is the only stuff, these things in the universe which are temporary, pain and suffering, this is his proof that they are temporary, that they will not be there forever.
So there's a male dominance in the Catholic Church in regards to physicians.
We have a lot of similarities with the Catholic Church. We do not worship them.
Would you say that's true or false? How does one physically, mentally, emotionally fall in love with active prayer?
The intercession of the saints is a very big part of our theology and our practice.
Yes, I'm religious, but no, I'm not a freak.
People tend to become atheists not because of their philosophical beliefs, but because of their personal conviction of sin.
If you have any questions, as usual, please email us sg101@cycnow.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
Welcome back, viewers. Please send your questions in to 0410950949. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Now, Ramsey and Abuna, we're going to discuss the effects of unhealthy self-esteem. So maybe, Ramsey, if you'd like to start off, and then Abuna will join in.
So, in terms of remedies for self-esteem.
Yep.
Yeah, so in terms of, how we can sort of work on this issue to start kind of, I guess, raising our self-esteem a little bit to a healthy level. As I said, it's important to keep it balanced.
Yeah.
But we go back to this whole idea of outcomes versus values-based living. So outcomes-based living is all about what I think I should have, okay, rather than who I think I should be.
Yeah.
So if I'm in that cycle, if I'm in that trap of, I need to be a certain way to be accepted by other people or to be worthwhile,
yes.
Then I need to start, I guess, shifting gears a little bit and operating a little bit differently. So I need to actually connect with my values. I need to know what my values are. I need to get in touch with my values. Basically, another way of saying another way of defining values is what actions can I produce that make me feel like I'm being who I should be as a human being. Sure. And as a Christian, obviously we know what values I've got as a Christian, but it again goes for non-Christians as well.
Yes.
And the research shows that even when Christians, non-Christians start acting in accordance with their values, it elevates their sense of meaning and purpose in life. Okay?
So if we're not acting in terms of our values, as you said, whether non-Christians or Christians, what effect does that have on our lives if we're not meeting those values? So maybe talk a bit about the effects, and then we'll shoot right into the remedies.
Yep. So basically, it means basically that we're going to, it's going to affect certain things such as our achievement. I won't do things, or I won't try things that are new, for instance. So if I've got an unhealthy level of self-esteem, because I'm not living in accordance with my values, I'm basically like outcomes driven, I'm not going to be in control. And so because I'm not in control, ultimately, of those things, then I'm not going to try new things. Right. And so, I'm not going to reach my potential. It also means that I'm going to have a flawed attitude, towards life in general. Like I said before, it comes back down to cognitions and the way that I think as well. So if I think, for instance, I'm not good enough, or the world's not a good place, or I'm not acceptable to other people, or people will never accept me, then that changes the way that I interact with other people, changes my relationships with other people. If I'm married, for instance, it changes the intimacy in my relationship in a negative way. If I can't accept myself as a person, it's going to be very hard for someone else to accept me. If you're around someone who has a very negative outlook or has a very low self-esteem, very low way of looking at themselves, it's very hard to be around those sorts of people, and it's very frustrating because you can't convince them, that they're worthwhile, because you're giving them attention no matter how much you try to actually convince them. These are deep-seated core beliefs. So that person needs to then, implement strategies to be able to start having a values-based life. You know?
Yeah. So we just had another question come in. Thank you very much for this question, and it's very timely to add it on now because it's really relative to what you're just saying. So the question is, if my daughter has a low self-esteem, what actions should I as a parent take in order to improve their confidence with being unrealistic?
With their confidence?
Yeah, what actions can I take to improve their confidence so they don't, without being unrealistic? So I guess maybe they're saying, what sort of things should I do? So maybe one of those things is, and I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but maybe, you know, I could wake up every morning and say, you're great, you're going to be wonderful, today's going to be a great day. And we're trying to improve that person's, view of what's going to happen, but it may be over the top.
I think
and it may be something
that's,
yeah,
the balance
that's
has
right.
to be right.
That's right. So
otherwise, we'll end up the cases Ramsey said about the too high self-esteem and getting a shock at the end.
Yeah.
But definitely in that case, if she's having a low self-esteem, then obviously we need to review, as a parent, we need to review the way that we're actually communicating with our children. Sometimes it actually comes down to the expectation of the parent. So the parent need to actually examine and review the expectation of the child. Because some of the parents do that without realizing, is they communicate the expectations to the children, and the children cannot meet the expectations, so already feel they can't be good enough. They'll never make their parents happy. They're not good enough. So first of all, the parent needs to review and be honest with themselves. What are the expectations they have of their children and how they communicated that to them? For example, a parent may place more importance on one aspect of the child love than. For example, some parents, all they care about is academic. You know, if you don't get high grades, that means you're nothing. And they ignore, for example, that the child maybe have a talent in sport or music or art. So whenever they get bad grades, they just, you know, punish them or give them, you know, very harsh words. And if they do well at sport, arts, trivial thing, you know, sport is not important. So the parent needs to find out the strength of the child and highlight the strength and praise them on their strength.
Okay.
And when it comes to the weaknesses, they need to tell them, you've done your best, you can try hard next time, you know, we still love you, we still accept you. Everyone has different talents, you know, God created each one individually, each one unique. A beautiful Psalm, Psalm 139, it says, I praise you, Lord, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. So that shows that God creates us as unique individuals. So someone has different talents. Everyone has a unique talent. Okay, so we as a parent, they need to sort of shift from my own preference or my own priority or significance I place on a particular talent in my child, and try to shift that to praise them more on the strength. Focus on the strength rather than the weakness, and highlight the strength. Okay, and try to get them to do things where they can actually achieve better, so they can find an excuse to praise them on it.
Okay, so they can feel within themselves more worthy, because now I've actually seen something that I feel that I'm good at. But then again, and I agree totally, but it's very, very important, because they're the things that lift us up. But then are we getting to the area of being more objective, based on objectives rather than, or I guess if we're talking about if they're good at a sport, rather than saying, yeah, you won the game, it's like, what a great effort, you played so well, and you can see you really enjoyed doing that.
I just remembered a story, I can't remember the exact details, but it just came to my mind now. One of the, maybe if you know it, one of the famous artists in the world, he was describing how he became an artist. It was actually, he actually said that was his parents that discovered, because of the praise of his parents, they actually gave him the confidence, and he found that talent in himself. He discovered that talent through the praise and the courage he received from his parents. I can't remember the exact details, but it goes something like they left him at home by himself when he was young, and they came back, the house was a big mess, and there was paint everywhere. There was, you know, all the color pencils everywhere. There was using different, water paint, and he was trying to draw something. He made a big mess in the house. The parents did not come and scream at him. The parents actually looked at whatever he drew and said, what a wonderful piece of art. It was all not really wonderful, just any you know.
Probably the lounges had marks, and the walls had marks, and parents are going, no!
So they actually praise him for that
Yeah.
piece of art and say, how wonderful, that's beautiful. And that gave him the strength to actually go on and had the self-belief to actually become a great artist. I can't remember his name, but that's just a story that came to my mind now.
It's really beautiful. As parents, I don't think we realise how much influence and I don't like to use the word power, but it really is, I guess, influence that we have on our children and what they become. And as you were saying earlier, that it's a cycle. We do what we see our parents do. So it's, and I think nowadays we have so much on the internet, so much information available to us that we can turn it around. But you know, it is a difficult thing. And maybe one of the questions that I could ask is that when you see that happening and you know what you want to do, how do you turn that around? Like, you know, if I see one that has low self-esteem, they're really, really struggling. Sometimes you almost feel lost for words. It's almost like you can't dig into the person to bring that out. And you may not be with them all the time. You maybe see them in short bursts. So it's a great example with the parents of Una. But in terms of
praise is the key.
Yeah.
As parents, we need to praise our children more.
Yeah. And I'll just add something just for this parent that's asking this question, to add on to that, is that there's a difference between general praise and descriptive praise. So descriptive praise is telling your son or your daughter exactly what you're praising them for. So specifically. And if we link that with values-based living, hopefully knowing your child well enough, you know when they're engaging behaviours that are to do with outcomes or whether they're engaging in behaviours that are all about who I'm actually becoming as a person. Right. So for instance, if you notice your child, calling a friend even when they don't feel like it and they're tired and they're offering support, as a parent, we might think, internally, that's great that my child's doing that. We're just kind of happy about it, but there's not much, there's no praise about that. You're just kind of proud that you've got, of your child, but it's really important in those moments to give them descriptive praise and to go up to them and sit down with them and have a conversation and say, you know what, you were really tired today, and you've had a lot going on for you, but you've actually, I'm so proud of you that you've made the decision, to be this kind of person to your friend, and so that's the kind of stuff, if you're a parent, that's the kind of stuff that I'd be engaging in with my child in order to get them to be more values focused, and I'm praising them at the same time, which is kind of lifting up their self-esteem, and it gets them away from this outcomes-driven way of operating.
So you're helping them build their value system.
Exactly, while making them feel good about themselves as well.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. So maybe we can just quickly go across to the remedies then, because you might have a few questions that come as a result of that. So in terms of remedies for healthy self-esteem, which, thank you, viewer, you actually started us on that path, what are some other remedies that we could suggest?
So setting goals that are based on your values. So there's what we call a values wheel, and it's like you pick your top 8 values. So imagine a pie chart, and you break it up into 8 sectors, and in each sector you've got a certain value, something that's really important to you. And then you give yourself a rating on each one of those values based on how much I feel that I'm consistently living based on these values. How much am I putting these values in action in my life currently? And so if you find that some of them have low scores, then think about what you can do today. Think about what you can do tomorrow. What goals can I set to actually start living based on these values? It could be the tiniest goals. It doesn't have to be something, doesn't have to be, groundbreaking stuff. And you aim to increase those scores. And it's got nothing to do with how the other person's going to respond or what outcomes are going to come out of it. It's completely in my control because it's all about who I'm choosing to be as a person, And I'm sure Apuna's going to talk a little bit later on also about when we, doing that with our Christian values. So that whole idea of being very mindful of who I'm becoming as a person as opposed to what do I have as a person in terms of my status, in terms of my wealth, in terms of my appearance, in terms of all that stuff. It's a movement away from all of that and as much more of a concentration and a focus, and hopefully we reflect at the end of our day, what did I do today? And if I didn't really live a values-based life today, what goals can I set for tomorrow?
Yes.
And then when we start to live our lives that way, we'll, give it a few days, give it a couple of weeks, we'll feel that we have more of a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives.
And when it comes, as you said, in terms of values, from the Christian perspective, the Christian values perspective, knowing my self-worth or knowing having a proper or balanced self-esteem is so important, because if I don't live by these values, that means without even realizing, I'll be easily giving up my Christian values. Is because if I don't appreciate what I have, if I'm not living these values, I can easily give it away. If I don't appreciate the value of something I have, some people may even give up their Christian faith, or can easily get out and not being a true Christian. It's because of that low self-esteem they have, because they're not practicing that value in their life. They're not practicing, what it means to be loved by God, what it means to love others. They turned, low self-esteem will turn them to become more jealous of others. They feel threatened by others. And instead of, following the commandments, love each other, they'll feel each other person is a threat to them. People, especially youth, in terms of image wise, someone who looks, more pretty than them, then they'll start to be jealous. They'll start to envy. They'll start to actually complain about themselves. Instead of giving thanks, they'll start to look at themselves down from a different perspective. So living the Christian values with having a low self-esteem will definitely impact that. And I wouldn't be living the true Christian values that I should be living.
What about things like taking responsibility for my behaviour, and in terms, I guess, measuring myself against those values? Because I suppose when we fall short, it's very easy to blame someone for our shortfallings, or maybe even things like judgment come after that later on. So how important is that to our self-esteem, about actually understanding, I guess, what we can do within ourselves versus what we can do to help or to fix or to change other people? So if we're in a relationship, even within a family environment, sometimes we can get very frustrated because we see someone else doing something that's making us crazy, but we can't control what they do, but we can control what we do and what we live with our values.
That's right. And I think if we can accept ourselves better, we can also accept other people much more efficiently as well. And so if I'm living based on my values and I'm setting goals and I'm making my life about what I'm doing, not what I'm achieving, then what I'm actually doing is I'm practicing self-acceptance. So I'm working from the outside in. I'm working on an action-based level. Okay, so I'm looking at what my values are, not my feelings. I can let my thoughts of low self-esteem kind of be there. I don't have to get rid of them. I can have these negative cognitions play through, and I'm not good enough and all of that sort of stuff, and I can say thank you very much, but I'm going to act based on my values. And then I put those goals into action. When I do that, I'm practicing self-respect. I'm also practicing being happy with who I am, who I truly am as a person. And then I begin to accept myself more. When I accept myself truly, I become less frustrated with other people. And I can start to accept other people. If research shows that if I'm very critical of myself and I don't like myself, I'm going to try to find faults in other people, because that makes me feel better about myself.
Right. That's a very dangerous place to be.
So,
but how do I accept myself? This is the question. How do I accept myself if I'm suffering from low self-esteem? I wouldn't accept myself. I'm not happy with myself.
But I think the whole point, Abuna, is that when I'm practicing my values, I'm putting my values into action, even though I'm having these negative thoughts, slowly over time, by practicing those actions, my thoughts will then adjust automatically.
But it doesn't come down to exactly knowing who I am. So for me to accept myself, I need to know who I am.
Exactly.
And it comes down to my identity in Christ. And the only way to find who I am is actually through the lens of Christ. Who I am through the lens of Christ. Because we fall into a dilemma. There's three different levels we actually look at ourselves. It's my perception of myself. It's perception of who I am through the lens of other people. And my perception of myself through the lens of Christ. The first two, in terms of how I feel about myself, that fluctuates. One day I feel good about myself, the other day I feel hopeless and miserable. The other one's through we tend to rely a lot on who I am through the lens of how people perceive me, how people think of me. And this is the dilemma that a lot of people fall into, is we invest a lot of energy and effort in trying to make ourselves acceptable in the eyes of people. And the opinion is so important for us. And we take their opinion, and this is how we assess or formulate our worth or our esteem based on what they think of me. If people think I'm a failure, then I'm a failure. If people think I'm good, then I'm good. And this is a disaster, because people judge by what they see. They don't know what's inside. So it actually tends to be a false assessment. It's a inaccurate assessment. It could be misleading sometimes. If I'm a good actor, I can give people the wrong impression. So that's why the ideal thing is for me to understand who I am in the eyes of Christ. And only when I know that, then I can see my true self-worth. And this is the key to actually having the balanced, proper self-esteem.
I think last night we attended a liturgy actually for the HSC students, and there was a beautiful part, and I think it was the fraction, and it just really stuck in my mind, and it said, God is the author of humanity. So the author of humanity means knows everything, inside out, every single detail. So it really gives us appreciation, first of all, that he knows who we are, he knows our capabilities, he knows everything intimately about us. And then there was a beautiful Bible verse that I came across, and it's from the Song of Solomon's 4:7. It says, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you." Now, that's just, it's poetry, and it's beauty. It's like if our God sees us in that light, no matter what where we're at, what we've done, what we think of ourselves, it gives us so much hope.
And the thing is, we forget is the Bible is full of affirmations of how valuable we are to God. Like, St. Paul said it, because we look at the very beginning of the Bible, the first pages, we created in God's image and likeness.
Yes.
What more value can I get than the image of Christ himself, in the image of God? You can't get any higher than that. We tend to ignore that, we tend to forget that. And St. Paul goes on to say that we are his workmanship. We are like the crown of the creation. God created everything, and he said it was good, but when he created man, he said, very good. Very good. That's man, put man up there on top of everything. It's all the creation. So as the human race is actually the crown of the creation. And we see St. Paul in different ways. He said that we, as God's creation, we are his masterpiece, we're his work of art. So we are of so important value that we need to appreciate that. This is the people that fall into low self-esteem, they forget that. They tend to focus on the other two that I said, about how they perceive themselves and how others perceive them, and they forget about what's their worth. The best way to remember this is see, and when I talk to God, I say that God, I can do all things through you. We say, St. Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I'm more than a conqueror. So all these encouraging verses gives me hope. I'm more than a conqueror. I'm his workmanship. I'm his work of art. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. All these things gives me my true self-worth. And as a result, I can have the balanced self-esteem. It's not because of me. My self-esteem is not based on my achievements, as you said. It's not based on it's based on that I'm good enough, that I've been bought by Christ. He bought me back. He came and died for me. I can see my self-esteem in the cross. When I look at the cross, this is how much God loves me. And this gives me the feel. So it doesn't matter if I fail in something. It doesn't matter if I have a particular talent. It doesn't matter if I'm not good as my friend or relative. I still have that value. That value is stable. That value does not change. That value is like having a diamond that has some dust on it. It has the intrinsic value in it. It does not change because of the dust. Okay? It does not change its value. And this is what we need to believe in. That our value comes from God's love for us.
And I think based on the fact that our Lord is always running after us, he's always knocking on our door, he's always trying so many things to bring us to him, shows that value and that love. I think that would even be hard to find in a relationship with anyone, that someone is constantly so in love with you, so wanting you, that they're always knocking on your door, they're always there for you, and they are solid. It's not like people of the world, I guess, where they change or your opinions change from one day to the next. You know, our Lord has promises. He has promises of love, of, as you said, Abuna, He gave His life for that.
Yes, and I love the example of the story of Moses in the Old Testament. In Exodus, when God asked him to go and lead the people of Israel out of Egypt, you know, Moses went and told him, how can I do that? I'm not eloquent in speech. I cannot talk properly. You know, a beautiful verse. Actually, this is what Moses said to God. He said, I'm slow of speech and of tongue. How do you want me to lead all these people out? And this is what our Lord told him. He said, who made man's mouth? You know, who made him a mute? Go and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you should say. So God, He's telling us, you know, your talents, your experience, all this doesn't matter. You know, I can give you that. That's easy stuff. You just need to believe in me. Yeah. You just need to believe the value of you. Aaron was much more eloquent. His brother, Aaron, was much more eloquent. Okay? But God did not choose Aaron. He chose Moses. He had low self-esteem. And many times he tried to escape from that responsibility. And God gets him back. Okay? So that's an example of someone who at that time had low self-esteem. And we see when he trusted in God, when he actually realized his true value in God, he became a great leader. A great leader.
And they say God does His best work in the lonely of heart, in the simple. So it's just so beautiful on so many accounts. So I'm sorry, viewers, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, Ramsey, for joining us, and Abuna for being here on our last episode for the year. So we're going to be offline for a little while. We'll see you, though, in the new year on the 29th, I think it is, Thursday the 29th, where we're going to discuss anger. So it should be very, very exciting. Now, just before we wrap up, just a few little things. We know over the Christmas break, it's a beautiful time. Remember the Nativity of Christ. Such a special time for a lot of people, but it's also a difficult time for a lot of people on some physical levels, on financial levels. So we keep you all in our prayers, and we'd just like to remind you that if you're struggling through this time, please feel free to call. There are a number of phone lines that you can call. Hopefully they'll be up on the screen in a moment, but there's Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline, and you can call these numbers at any time and there'll be support ready for you. And, you know, I guess Abuna and Ramsey, would you like to finish off with just a very quick Christmas message for everyone before we say goodbye? I
would like to tell the viewers, Christmas is a time when we're actually preparing our heart to receive Christ. Like our heart is the manager for Christ. So we're preparing our heart to receive Him. So we need to work on our heart to receive Him. It's the best time because Christmas comes with the New Year as well. So that's the best time of the year to examine and review our heart so we can make it prepared. 2019 will be a blessed year.
Fantastic. Ramsey?
And just, you know, to tie it in with the topic, a verse that I thought about earlier, St. Paul says, you know, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So always remember, whether it be the Christmas period or whether it be any period in time, to know my Christian values and know what Christ's values are, because these are my values, and to hopefully live that out through the fast of the Nativity. And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Well said. And viewers, perhaps I could also encourage you to give a Christmas present to our Lord Jesus Christ. And if you can find some time to do a good deed, an act of compassion for someone who is in need or someone you haven't spoken to a long time, I really encourage that. God bless you and good night.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
In the book of Hosea, chapter 4 and verse 6, he says, "My people are destroyed because of the lack of knowledge."
Who are the heroes of Orthodoxy?
So the priesthood is not a representation of Christ, rather it is the presence of Christ.
everyone, and welcome to Now I See on CYC.
People finding Christ.
The desire of God to find his people.
Motives of change.
She told me a lot about the church, and I was like, this is interesting to me, you know, like I was actually rather keen on knowing all about it.
Many experiences.
Everything is planned, everything is according to God's will in his time.
Turning points.
My baptism and my being reborn.
Of Now I See on CYC, I'm Anna Choi.
Now I See, a new, interesting show only on CYC.